I'm Olivia Parker, and last week a text message from my aunt nearly shattered me. It simply read, "No failures allowed at the reunion." After 12 years of relentlessly building my hotel empire, my family still seemed to think I was worthless because I hadn't become a doctor or a lawyer. The irony was almost comical. They'd booked their lavish family gathering at the Paragon, the most exclusive hotel in the city. You know, the one with my name on the building deed where I personally approve every VIP guest. Oh, they had absolutely no idea what was coming. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from, and hit subscribe if family drama hits close to home. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. The Parker Legacy. A blueprint for success. Growing up as a Parker meant one thing: excellence wasn't just expected, it was demanded. My father, Richard, built his surgical practice from nothing, performing delicate spinal procedures on professional athletes and wealthy executives. My mother, Catherine, skillfully balanced her role as the youngest partner at her corporate law firm with maintaining our picture-perfect family image in Boston's elite social circles. From the outside, we were the American dream personified. Every Parker child had their future meticulously mapped out by age 10. My oldest brother, Marcus, became a neurosurgeon, not just continuing Dad's legacy, but improving upon it by specializing in pediatric cases. My sister, Vanessa, graduated top of her class at Harvard Law, clerked for a Supreme Court justice, and now runs a successful practice specializing in constitutional law. My younger brother, Alexander, became an investment banker at a prestigious firm, making his first $1 million before turning 30. And then there was me, Olivia, the family disappointment. It wasn't always that way. I was a bright child with creative instincts that simply didn't fit our family's narrow definition of success. While my siblings competed for the highest grades and most prestigious extracurriculars, I found immense joy in creating experiences. I'd transform our backyard into elaborate themed spaces for neighborhood gatherings, often losing myself for hours in the details. I organized our school's events with such meticulous attention that every guest felt genuinely special. I could walk into any space and instantly see how to improve it, how to make it more welcoming, more memorable. Glorified party planning, my father would scoff. A hobby, not a career, my mother would say dismissively at family dinners. My siblings' accomplishments were celebrated with champagne toasts, their accolades echoing through our grand dining room. My creative projects, however, received tight smiles and quick subject changes. Our extended family was cut from the same judgmental cloth. The Parker family reunion happened every 5 years, hosted by my Aunt Marilyn, my father's older sister, and the self-appointed family matriarch since my grandparents passed. She'd married into old money and never ever let anyone forget it. These gatherings weren't about connection or love. Rather, they were an Olympics of achievement, where every conversation became a subtle yet fierce competition. Alexander's been accepted to Wharton's MBA program with a full scholarship. Vanessa just won her 3rd major case at the Supreme Court level. Marcus pioneered a new surgical technique that's being published in 3 medical journals. And then, like a record scratch, there was always that awkward moment when someone would turn to me and ask, "And what about you, Olivia, still figuring things out?" Aunt Marilyn was the worst. She'd married Uncle Theodore when she was 23. A calculated move that secured her position in society. She never had a career, but she judged everyone else's mercilessly. At my high school graduation, while other relatives offered congratulations, Aunt Marilyn cornered me a glass of champagne, clutched in her perfectly manicured hand. Hospitality management. That's glorified housekeeping, darling, she'd purred, her voice dripping with condescension. Parkers don't serve people. They employ people who serve. I remember feeling my cheeks burn a searing blush of humiliation as cousins nearby pretended not to listen, but clearly were. My cousin Stephanie, Aunt Marilyn's daughter, gave me a pitying look before turning back to her friends. Stephanie was attending Yale pre-med at the time, meticulously following the approved Parker path. Success in our family was measured by a simple, unyielding formula. Prestigious degrees plus high-earning careers plus social status, worth. There was no room for deviation, no allowance for alternative paths. My parents had invested in the best private schools, hired tutors, and leveraged their connections to pave golden roads for their children. The unspoken expectation was that we would follow those roads without question. The road less traveled. Choosing my own path. When I announced my decision to attend Cornell's School of Hotel Administration, instead of pursuing pre-med or pre-law, the family reaction was as if I declared I was joining a cult. My father's disappointment manifested as raw anger, my mother's as tearful manipulation. My siblings watched with a mixture of confusion and secondhand embarrassment. "The hotel industry is beneath your potential," my father had roared during our final argument before I left for college. "You'll be taking orders from people like us, not giving them." What they never understood was that I didn't see hospitality as servitude. I saw it as creating magic, as orchestrating moments people would remember for a lifetime. I wasn't rejecting success. I was redefining it on my own terms. Before leaving for Cornell, I found a quote by Maya Angelou that resonated deeply. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. I wrote it on a small card and kept it in my wallet. Through every family gathering where I felt small, through every dismissive comment about my choices, it became my secret mantra. When doubt crept in, I'd clutch that card, reminding myself of my true purpose. The weekend I left for college, Aunt Marilyn hosted a dinner to celebrate Marcus receiving his first research grant. As everyone raised their glasses to toast his achievement, she looked directly at me and said, "To pursuing excellence rather than ease." The message was chillingly clear. I had chosen the easy path, the path of least resistance, the path of failure. Little did they know I was about to embark on the hardest journey of my life, one that would test every ounce of my resolve, and ultimately lead me to a success they couldn't even imagine. Forging my own empire. The brutal ascent, Cornell's hotel school, quickly dispelled any notion that I had chosen an easy path. The program was rigorous, combining business fundamentals with specialized hospitality knowledge and practical experience. While my classmates called home for extra money or advice, I suffered in silence. I had made a solemn promise to myself I would succeed or fail on my own terms, not crawling back to prove my family right. 3 months into my freshman year, my parents made their ultimatum clear during a tense phone call. Either transfer to pre-law by next semester, or we're cutting you off financially, my father stated flatly, his voice devoid of warmth. My mother's voice trembled in the background, a theatrical plea. "Please, Olivia, we only want what's best for you." The decision should have been impossible for a 19-year-old with no savings, yet somehow it was the easiest choice I'd ever made. "Then cut me off," I replied, surprised by the steely steadiness in my voice. "I'll find a way." And find a way I did. Though the path was brutal, it forged me. I took a job working the front desk at a local hotel from 1100 p.m. to 700 a.m., sleeping in short bursts between classes. On weekends, I picked up catering shifts at campus events. During semester breaks, when dorms closed, I house sat for professors to save on rent. My grades suffered initially as I balanced work and school, but I was learning something far more valuable than perfect scores resilience. By junior year, I was managing the front office at the Statler, the student-run hotel on campus, while maintaining a 3.7 GPA. I lived on ramen noodles and coffee, worked through holidays, and sent my siblings generic birthday cards I could barely afford. The rare times I checked social media, I saw my family vacationing in the Maldives, or celebrating at Michelin-starred restaurants. I shut down my accounts after that. Their lives felt like a gilded cage compared to my gritty reality. My first post-graduation job was as an assistant manager at a mid-range chain hotel in Newark, New Jersey. The property was understaffed, the owner was cutting corners on maintenance, and the guests were often difficult. My tiny apartment had a persistent mold problem, and my second-hand car broke down weekly. This was not the glamorous hotel career my family had mockingly predicted. One night, after handling a particularly aggressive guest who was furious about overbooking, I sat in the back office and cried. I was exhausted, broke, and questioning everything. That's when I met Jackson Miller, the regional director, conducting a surprise inspection. Instead of reprimanding me, he sat down and listened. "You have something rare," he told me after I'd composed myself. "You're thinking about the guest experience even when you're at your breaking point. That can't be taught." Jackson became the mentor I desperately needed. He saw potential where my family had seen only disappointment. Under his guidance, I moved to Philadelphia to help turn around a struggling boutique hotel. I worked 16-hour days, redesigning the guest experience from check-in to check-out. 6 months later, occupancy rates had increased by 40%, and I received my first significant bonus. I called my mother to share the news, hoping for even a small acknowledgement of my progress. "That's nice, dear," she said distractedly. "Did you hear Vanessa is engaged to a senator's son? The wedding will be at the plaza next spring. You'll need to find something appropriate to wear." The conversation quickly turned to my sister's achievements, with no further interest in mine. By the time I hung up, the small victory I'd felt earlier had evaporated. I never cashed that bonus check. Instead, I framed it a stark reminder that my achievements were valid even without my family's approval. The isolation of ambition, building in silence. As I approached my late 20s, communication with my family became increasingly strained. Holiday visits were exercises in forced politeness, each interaction layered with unspoken judgments. At one Thanksgiving dinner, my brother Alexander asked what I made annually, then barely disguised his snicker when I told him. "That's what my assistant makes," he remarked, cutting into his turkey. I stopped attending family holidays after that. The emotional cost was simply too high. When I turned 30, I made a pivotal decision to leave Philadelphia and move to Chicago, where the hospitality industry was booming. I ended a 2-year relationship with Brian, an investment banker, who, despite his initial support, had begun to echo my family's values. "You're too smart to be doing what you're doing," he'd said during our final argument. "You could be running a major corporation by now instead of babysitting hotel guests." The breakup was painful, not because I loved him deeply, but because it reinforced that I was choosing a path of solitude. My family didn't understand me, my boyfriend didn't understand me. Sometimes in my darkest moments, I wondered if there was something fundamentally wrong with me for not wanting what others seemed to value. Chicago brought new challenges, but also a liberating freedom. I was truly on my own in a city where no one knew me as the Parker disappointment. I took a position as operations director at a hip new hotel concept targeting millennial travelers. The pay was still modest, but I was learning the business from the inside out, understanding everything from front desk operations to inventory management to marketing strategies. The loneliness of building a life without family support was sometimes overwhelming. I'd walk through the hotel lobby during the holidays, watching joyful reunions between guests and their loved ones, feeling the acute absence of anyone who truly cared about my journey. I made friends among colleagues, but kept them at a distance, afraid to let anyone too close after years of rejection. What my family never saw during those years of struggle was how deeply I was learning the hospitality industry. Every setback taught me something valuable. Every difficult guest helped me refine my approach to service. Every tight budget forced me to innovate. I wasn't just surviving. I was laying the groundwork for something they couldn't possibly imagine. The seeds of an empire. A vision realized. Chicago changed everything. 6 months into my role at the trendy boutique hotel, I met Sophia Reynolds during a hospitality industry mixer. Sophia had made her fortune in tech and was looking to diversify her investments. She was sharp, straightforward, and unlike most people I'd met, actually listened when I spoke about my vision for revolutionizing luxury hospitality. "Everyone focuses on amenities," I explained as we shared an overpriced bottle of wine. "More thread count, bigger televisions, fancier toiletries. But true luxury isn't about stuff. It's about making guests feel seen, anticipated, and valued." 3 hours and 2 bottles later, Sophia slid her business card across the table. "I want to hear more. Let's meet next week with my financial team." I assumed nothing would come of it. Wealthy people often made empty promises, but Sophia wasn't like them. She showed up with her team, listened intently to my detailed presentation, asked tough questions, and then did the unthinkable. She offered to be the primary investor in my own boutique hotel concept. "Your family must be thrilled," she said, her eyes twinkling as we signed the initial partnership agreement. I forced a smile. They don't exactly know yet. Sophia raised an eyebrow but didn't press. She understood ambition and privacy better than most. With Sophia's backing, Parker Hospitality Group was born. Though I kept my involvement quiet, we purchased a dilapidated Art Deco building in an up-and-coming Chicago neighborhood. I lived in a small apartment within the construction zone for 10 months, overseeing every single detail of the renovation. I wanted to create something that would redefine luxury as authenticity and attention rather than ostentation. The Legacy Hotel opened to little fanfare in the mainstream press, but quickly became a whispered recommendation among celebrities and business elite who valued privacy and personalized service above all. I implemented systems to track guest preferences in ways that felt magical rather than intrusive. A guest who once mentioned loving a specific author might find that author's latest book on their nightstand during their next stay. A business traveler who always requested extra pillows would find them already in the room without asking. During those early years, I worked 80-hour weeks while my family continued to believe I was drifting aimlessly. My mother's occasional calls always included some version of, "It's not too late to go to law school, dear." I deflected their questions about my career with vague responses about working in hospitality management, which they took as confirmation of my failure. In reality, the Legacy Hotel's success exceeded all projections. Within 2 years, we were operating at 95% occupancy with a waitlist for peak periods. Sophia and I began looking for our next opportunities this time with a larger group of investors who had taken notice of our undeniable success. We strategically acquired a struggling historic hotel in downtown Chicago, then one in New York, followed by properties in San Francisco and Miami. I made a conscious decision to operate behind the scenes. No press interviews, no public profile, no industry awards. The hotels ran under the Parker Hospitality Group banner, but few people knew who the E. Parker was. I wanted the work to speak for itself. And perhaps in some corner of my heart, I wanted to reveal my success to my family, only when it was too massive to be dismissed. My siblings occasionally sent condescending text messages or holiday cards with family photos showcasing their perfect lives, Marcus, with his doctor wife and 3 Harvard-bound children. Vanessa arguing cases before the Supreme Court, Alexander closing billion-dollar deals. I kept these painful reminders of my exclusion in a box, using them as fuel when doubt crept in. The Paragon. My stage for a reckoning. 7 years after opening our first property, Parker Hospitality Group had 12 luxury hotels across the country, each unique but united by our philosophy of anticipatory service and authentic luxury. Industry insiders knew about our remarkable profitability and employee retention rates, but I remained virtually unknown to the public until the Paragon. Until the opportunity to acquire Boston's most storied hotel property came unexpectedly. The century-old institution had fallen into disrepair under corporate ownership that prioritized cost-cutting over guest experience. When it came on the market, I knew it had to be mine, not just as a business opportunity, but as a statement. The Paragon stood just 3 blocks from my parents' Beacon Hill home. It was where my family had hosted countless celebration dinners, where Aunt Marilyn held her annual charity galas, where Boston's elite gathered to see and be seen. My father had once pointed to it as we walked past and said, "That's what real success looks like. Olivia building something that lasts." I poured everything into the Paragon's restoration. The 2-year, $100 million renovation respected the property's history while bringing it into the modern era. I personally selected every fabric tested, every mattress tasted every menu item, and trained the staff in our signature service style. I kept my identity as owner private from nearly everyone working through shell companies and trusted advisors. Only the general manager and head of security knew who I really was. The Paragon reopened to spectacular reviews. A masterclass in understated luxury, wrote Travel and Leisure. The new standard in hospitality excellence, declared Forbes. Celebrities, politicians, and business icons clamored for reservations. The waiting list for a stay stretched to months. And still my family had no idea. They continued to view the Paragon as a symbol of success that I would never achieve, unaware that they were standing in the house I built. The irony might have remained private if not for the upcoming Parker family reunion. After 12 years of building my empire in silence, everything was about to change. The invitation, a gauntlet thrown. I first learned about the upcoming family reunion through Instagram. My cousin Stephanie's teenage daughter had tagged family members in a post. "Can't wait for the big Parker reunion at the Paragon and our family legacy and Boston elite." I stared at my phone, an icy dread forming in my stomach. The Paragon? Paragon. For a brief, hopeful moment, I wondered if this was their way of acknowledging my success. Had they somehow discovered my connection to the hotel? Was this an olive branch, a way to welcome me back into the fold, now that I had proven myself by their standards? I should have known better. The official invitation arrived a week later, via email, not addressed to me but to all Parker family members, on a group thread. Aunt Marilyn's message was effusive about the exclusive buyout of the Paragon's event spaces and how only the best would do for the Parkers. She detailed the weekend's activities, the dress code formal of course, and the expectation that everyone would share their latest achievements during Saturday's gala dinner. I was about to respond when a separate text message from Aunt Marilyn popped up on my phone. "Olivia. Dear, I'm sending this privately to spare you public embarrassment. The reunion is meant to celebrate Parker family success and legacy. Given your continued alternative lifestyle choices, we think it best you sit this one out. No failures allowed is our little theme this year. I'm sure you understand. Perhaps next time if things have improved for you." My hand shook as I read and reread the message. 12 years of back-breaking work reduced to failure in an instant. The familiar knot of inadequacy tightened in my chest, the one I thought I'd finally outgrown. I set my phone down and walked to the window of my penthouse office, overlooking Chicago's glittering skyline, my own properties shimmering in the distance. Before I could collect my thoughts, my phone buzzed again with activity from the family group chat. Someone had asked about my attendance. "Olivia won't be joining us." My mother wrote her words a quiet dismissal. "She's still figuring things out." My brother Alexander chimed in. "Too bad. The Paragon is probably looking for staff, though. Maybe she could serve us drinks." Several laughing emojis followed from cousins, and my sister Vanessa added, "Be nice." But yes, maybe Olivia could give us the insider tour of the service elevators and laundry facilities, since that's her area of expertise. I watched the conversation unfold in real time, each message a fresh cut. They didn't just think I was a failure, they found amusement in it. 12 years of complete independence of building something truly extraordinary, and they still saw me as nothing. My assistant Rachel knocked and entered my office with my afternoon schedule. She immediately noticed my expression. "What happened?" "You look like you've seen a ghost." I handed her my phone silently. Her eyes widened as she read. "These people are your family, the ones whose pictures you keep in that box." Her indignation on my behalf was touching. "And they don't know about any of this." She gestured around my office toward the empire I'd built. They never asked, I said simply. They decided who I was a long time ago. Rachel handed back my phone. So what are you going to do? The question hung in the air. What would I do? I could ignore the reunion entirely, continuing my policy of privacy and distance. I could send a message revealing my success, throwing it in their faces from a safe distance. Or, I said slowly, an idea forming. They've booked the entire main floor of the Paragon. 60 rooms for out-of-town family. The grand ballroom for Saturday's gala. Yes, Rachel confirmed. The executive team sent the contract over for your approval last week. I didn't make the connection to your family name. I walked to my desk and pulled up the reservation details. There it was, the Parker family reunion, hosted by Marilyn and Theodore Bennett. A complete buyout of the hotel's premier spaces a custom menu with premium wine pairings, special requests for welcome amenities, turn-down service, and Sunday brunch. The kind of event the Paragon excelled at, where no detail was overlooked and no expense spared for the comfort of our guests. In that moment, something crystallized within me. They had unknowingly chosen my domain for their celebration of success, while explicitly excluding me for not being successful enough. The universe had handed me the perfect stage for a reckoning. I'm going to attend, I said finally, a steely resolve settling deep in my bones. Not as a Parker, as the owner. The game begins. Observing my unaware family. Over the next week, I worked closely with Ryan Chen, my head of security at the Paragon, and Diana Williams, the general manager, to prepare. We reviewed the guest list room assignments and event details with meticulous care. I wanted everything to be flawless, not a single detail that could be criticized. The Parkers would receive the best service the Paragon had to offer. Do you want us to tell the staff who you are in relation to these guests? Diana asked during our planning session. No, I decided, just that I'm the owner making a rare appearance to ensure our VIP guests are well taken care of. Business as usual. Late at night, alone in my Chicago apartment, I battled conflicting emotions. Part of me fantasized about grand dramatic revelations, having the family escorted out by security, or making a spectacular entrance at the gala with a scathing speech about their years of emotional abuse. The revenge scenarios played out in technicolor detail as I tried to sleep. But another part of me, the part that had built Parker hospitality on principles of dignity and authentic human connection, recoiled at these fantasies. What would it say about me if I used my success merely as a weapon? Wasn't that exactly the kind of behavior I'd rejected in my family? Sophia called the night before I was due to fly to Boston. Are you sure about this? She asked after I explained the situation. You've spent years keeping your personal and professional lives separate. I'm not sure of anything, I admitted, a raw honesty in my voice. But I'm tired of living in separate pieces. Either this breaks things completely or begins some kind of healing. Either way, I'll be whole at the end of it. As my private jet approached Boston the next day, I looked out the window at the city where I'd grown up feeling perpetually inadequate. Somewhere down there, my family was arriving at the Paragon, completely unaware that they were walking into my house by my rules. The text from Aunt Marilyn still burned in my memory. No failures allowed. I was about to show them what failure really looked like. The Paragon security office was not designed for comfort. 6 screens displayed various areas of the hotel, from the grand lobby with its sweeping marble staircase to the restaurants and bar areas. Ryan Chen, my head of security, sat beside me as we watched the Parker family begin to arrive Friday afternoon. That's my father, I said, pointing to a distinguished gray-haired man checking in at the front desk. My mother, elegant beside him in a designer suit. Ryan nodded, making a note. We had compiled a digital dossier of key family members so the staff could recognize them. And that's Aunt Marilyn with my Uncle Theodore, I added, as a woman with perfectly coiffed silver hair strode through the doors, flanked by uniformed staff carrying her Louis Vuitton luggage. Even through the security monitor, her imperious bearing was unmistakable. I watched as she approached the front desk, bypassing the line. Even with the sound muted, I could read her body language entitlement personified. Let's listen in, Ryan suggested, activating the audio. We reserved the Windsor suite. Aunt Marilyn was saying, her voice carrying that distinctive upper-class Boston accent. But I've heard the Beacon Hill suite has a better view of the common. We'll take that instead. Diana Williams, the general manager, maintained her professional composure. I'm terribly sorry, Mrs. Bennett, but the Beacon Hill suite is already occupied. The Windsor suite is our presidential accommodation, and we've prepared it specially for you with the amenities you requested. Do you know who we are? Aunt Marilyn drew herself up, her voice rising in pitch. The Parkers are one of Boston's founding families. Surely whoever is in the Beacon Hill suite can be moved. I felt a familiar twist of embarrassment watching her behavior. This was how my family operated in the world, expecting it to bend to their will. I'd seen this scene play out countless times, growing up, always shrinking inside as waitstaff or store clerks were treated as obstacles rather than people. I cannot disclose information about other guests, but I assure you the Windsor suite will exceed your expectations, Diana replied smoothly. And the owner has arranged for a special welcome amenity for your entire party. At the mention of the owner, Aunt Marilyn's demeanor shifted subtly. The owner? You've spoken with them personally about our stay? Yes, Mrs. Bennet. The owner takes a special interest in all our significant events. This seemed to placate her somewhat. Being singled out by the owner aligned perfectly with her inflated sense of importance. Well, I suppose that's appropriate. The Windsor will have to do then. As Diana escorted them to the elevators, I exhaled slowly, not realizing I'd been holding my breath. Your staff handles difficult guests remarkably well, Ryan smiled. They've been trained by the best. Throughout the afternoon, I watched more family members arrive, my brothers and sister with their spouses and children cousins. I hadn't seen in years, family friends who were practically relatives. All were greeted with the impeccable service the Paragon was known for, all oblivious to the fact that the failure they'd excluded was monitoring their every reaction. I noticed patterns quickly. My father tipped generously but didn't make eye contact with staff. My sister Vanessa was glued to her phone, barely acknowledging the people serving her. My brother Alexander loudly name-dropped clients and business associates in the lobby, ensuring everyone knew his importance. The most revealing moments came when they thought no one important was watching my cousin Michael, complaining about the temperature of his welcome champagne, Aunt Marilyn's daughter Stephanie making a snide remark about the bellhop's uniform, Uncle Theodore sending back his old-fashioned 3 times until the bartender got it acceptable. Your family is... Ryan paused, searching for a diplomatic word. Challenging. I supplied a wry smile playing on my lips. I know. By evening, most of the family had gathered in the Paragon's renowned restaurant for dinner. I moved from the security office to a private dining room adjacent to the main restaurant, where I could observe without being seen. Through a partially open door, I listened to the conversations, to the laughter and stories being shared among people who had categorically rejected me. Did you hear about Olivia? My cousin Stephanie's voice carried clearly to where I sat. Aunt Catherine says she's living in some tiny apartment in Chicago, working at a hotel chain. Such a waste of potential. The Parkers paid for the best education money could buy, and she throws it away to become a glorified maid. Someone replied, their tone laced with disdain. At least she's not here making everyone uncomfortable with her life choices. Aunt Marilyn chimed in, her voice cutting through the chatter. This weekend is about celebrating real achievement. I felt my cheeks burn, but not with shame this time, with a fierce, unyielding resolve. I signaled to the server, who had been briefed on my presence. Please ensure my family wants for nothing tonight, I instructed quietly. Every whim, every preference, no matter how difficult. The Parker standard of excellence. Yes, Miss Parker. He nodded, slipping back into the main dining room. I didn't make my presence known that first night. Instead, I watched. I listened. I remembered. And with each dismissive comment about my absence, each mockery of my career path, I grew more certain that I was doing the right thing. Later that evening, as I took a rare moment to walk through the hotel lobby, checking details that only an owner would notice, I nearly collided with my cousin Stephanie coming from the bar. Excuse me, she said automatically, then looked at me more carefully. Do I know you? You look so familiar. 10 years had passed since she'd seen me. My appearance had changed significantly. The uncomfortable, insecure girl in ill-fitting clothes was gone, replaced by a woman in a tailored designer suit with confident posture and a different hairstyle. I don't believe we've met, I replied smoothly, enjoying her mild confusion. Enjoying your stay at the Paragon? Yes, it's magnificent. My family has a long history with this hotel. She waved her hand vaguely. We're having a big reunion this weekend. How wonderful, I smiled. Family is so important. It is, when they're worth claiming, she laughed, then caught herself. I shouldn't say that, just family drama, you know how it is. I certainly do, I said, my smile never wavering. Enjoy your evening, Miss Parker. I walked away before she could process that I'd used her last name without her mentioning it. By the time I returned to my suite, I had text messages from both Diana and Ryan, reporting that the family dinner had gone exceptionally well, despite numerous special requests and several complaints about minute details. The Parker family had retired to their rooms, pleased with their treatment. Unaware that every pillow fluffed, every drink mixed, every door held open was done under my direction. The grand unveiling. A Parker triumph. Saturday morning brought the first major event, a breakfast in the Royal Garden Terrace followed by family photographs on the grand staircase. I watched from my suite as they assembled in their color-coordinated outfits, the perfect picture of success and unity. To the Parker legacy, my father toasted raising his mimosa. 3 generations of excellence. Everyone clinked glasses and cheered. They looked like something from a magazine spread about America's elite families, not a hair out of place, not a single visible crack in the facade. The grand revelation was coming soon. As I prepared for the evening gala, selecting a gown that made me feel both powerful and authentically myself, I wondered what would happen when they finally saw me, when they realized whose name was really on this building. Would there be apologies? Denials? Would they try to claim they'd known all along? Would they attempt to take credit for my success, saying their tough love had motivated me? Or would there be genuine shock and perhaps a reckoning? Whatever happened, I was ready. 12 years of being the family failure had prepared me for this moment. The girl they had rejected had built an empire while they weren't looking, and tonight they would finally see me. Saturday evening arrived with a flurry of activity throughout the Paragon. The grand ballroom had been transformed for the Parker family gala, with crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow over tables adorned with elaborate floral arrangements. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Staff in immaculate uniforms circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I stood in my office adjacent to the ballroom, watching the family gather through a one-way glass panel. They were resplendent in evening wear, the women in designer gowns, the men in tailored tuxedos. From a distance, they looked perfect, exactly the image the Parker family had always projected to the world. Diana knocked and entered, looking elegant in her general manager's attire. Everything is proceeding according to plan. The family seems very pleased with the arrangements. And the special instructions I asked, all in place? The staff has been briefed. They still don't know you're related to the guests, but they understand this evening is particularly important to you. I nodded, smoothing down my midnight blue gown. I'd chosen it carefully sophisticated, but not showy expensive, but not ostentatious. I wanted to look like myself, not a costume of what my family considered success. I'm going to circulate for a while before making myself known, I decided. I want to take the temperature of the room. With a deep breath, I entered the ballroom from a side door, becoming just another elegantly dressed guest among many. The advantage of being estranged from one's family is that many members wouldn't recognize you after a decade. I moved through the crowd, picking up snippets of conversation, gauging the atmosphere. Marcus just received another research grant. $3 million for his pediatric neural study. Alexander closed the Jensen deal. The Wall Street Journal is calling it the acquisition of the year. Vanessa is being considered for a federal judgeship. The youngest in the circuit's history. The familiar litany of accomplishments washed over me. In the past, these conversations had made me feel small and inadequate. Tonight, they seemed almost quaint in their predictability. Near the bar, I overheard my mother speaking to a distant cousin. The hotel has exceeded our expectations. Marilyn was right to insist on the Paragon. They say the owner is some reclusive billionaire who personally approves every detail. The cousin nodded conspiratorially. I heard they turned away a celebrity last month because she was rude to the staff at check-in. Can you imagine having that kind of power? I smiled to myself, remembering the incident. The celebrity had been an entitled reality TV star who'd made a young desk clerk cry. I'd personally asked her to leave and had her bag sent to the Marriott down the street. As I turned away from the bar, I nearly collided with my mother. Up close, I could see the fine lines around her eyes that hadn't been there 10 years ago, the slight softening of her jawline despite what was clearly excellent cosmetic work. Her eyes flickered with momentary confusion. "Excuse me, do we know each other?" The years fell away, and suddenly I was that little girl again, desperate for her approval. My carefully scripted responses vanished, and I found myself speechless, heart hammering in my chest. "You look so familiar," she continued, studying my face. "Are you related to the Whitneys from Connecticut?" I shook my head, finally finding my voice. "No, I'm not." "Enjoying your evening, Mrs. Parker?" "Very much, thank you. The Paragon has outdone itself." "Are you with the hotel?" In a manner of speaking, I replied carefully. I take a special interest in events like this. Before she could inquire further, Aunt Marilyn's voice rang out across the ballroom, calling everyone to be seated for dinner. My mother excused herself and moved toward the head table, leaving me momentarily shaken by the near recognition. I retreated to a quiet corner, watching as my family settled at their assigned tables. Diana caught my eye from across the room, raising an eyebrow in question. I nodded slightly, indicating we should proceed as planned. Dinner service began flawlessly. The custom menu featured dishes I'd personally selected to showcase the Paragon's culinary excellence, with wine pairings for each course. From my vantage point, I could see the family enjoying the meal, complimenting the servers fully immersed in their celebration. Between the main course and dessert, Aunt Marilyn rose, champagne flute in hand, to give her traditional family address. The room quieted as she began speaking. "For 5 generations, the Parker name has stood for excellence in Boston. We've produced doctors who save lives, lawyers who shape justice, business leaders who drive innovation. Tonight, we celebrate not just our accomplishments, but the values that made them possible: discipline, ambition, and an unwavering commitment to being the very best." Murmurs of approval rippled through the room. "We may not be perfect," she continued with a self-deprecating laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "But we Parkers never settle for mediocrity. We never choose the easy path. We never embarrass the family name. My hands tightened around my water glass. I'd like to propose a toast to absent family members, she said, raising her glass higher. To those who couldn't be with us tonight because they're serving our country furthering their education abroad, or otherwise engaged in pursuits worthy of the Parker name. The deliberate omission was clear to anyone who knew I hadn't been invited. A flush of anger warmed my cheeks as family members raised their glasses. Just then, the moment I'd waited for presented itself. A commotion erupted at Aunt Marilyn's table as a server accidentally spilled a drop of red wine on the tablecloth near her designer purse. "This is unacceptable," she exclaimed, her voice carrying across the now silent room. "Where is the manager? The service here has been barely adequate all evening. To think we paid a premium for exclusivity." Diana approached the table immediately, the perfect picture of professional concern. "I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience, Mrs. Bennett. Please allow us to address this situation." "Address it. The damage is done. This purse is Hermes. I'll have you know." "Who's in charge here? I want to speak to whoever runs this establishment." The room was uncomfortably quiet now, other guests shifting awkwardly in their seats as Aunt Marilyn's voice rose with indignation. Diana maintained her composure. "Of course, Mrs. Bennett. As it happens, the owner is here tonight and would be happy to address your concerns personally." Aunt Marilyn looked momentarily mollified. Well, finally, some proper accountability. This was it. The moment 12 years in the making. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and stepped forward into the center of the room. All eyes turned to me. "Good evening, Aunt Marilyn," I said, my voice clear and steady. "I understand there's an issue with your table. As the owner of the Paragon, I want to ensure your complete satisfaction." The shock that rippled through the room was palpable. Aunt Marilyn's face went from imperious to confused to ashen in the span of seconds. My father half rose from his chair, mouth open, but no words emerging. My mother's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, spilling across the white tablecloth. Olivia, my sister Vanessa, was the first to find her voice disbelief evident in every syllable. "Hello, family," I said, addressing the room at large. "Welcome to the Paragon, my hotel, one of 12 in the Parker Hospitality Group portfolio, which I founded and own outright." The silence was deafening. Faces registered shock, confusion, disbelief. "I understand there was some concern about wine on the tablecloth." I continued approaching Aunt Marilyn's table with measured steps. "We take every detail seriously here. It's what has earned us 5 stars and a reputation as the most exclusive hotel in Boston." I signaled to a nearby server, who immediately began blotting the nearly invisible wine spot with a precise technique I'd personally developed for such situations. "This isn't possible," Aunt Marilyn finally sputtered. "You're a hotel employee? You work at some chain in Chicago. I own a rather significant property in Chicago." "Yes," I replied calmly, along with hotels in New York, San Francisco, Miami, and several other cities. The Parker Hospitality Group employs over 2,000 people and generated $300 million in revenue last year. My brother Alexander's face had turned an interesting shade of purple. "You're lying. This is some kind of stunt." Diana stepped forward smoothly, presenting a portfolio with the Paragon's ownership documents and recent press coverage of Parker Hospitality Group. "If I may, these materials verify Miss Parker's position." My father took the portfolio with shaking hands, scanning the documents, his expression unreadable. "Why didn't you tell us?" my mother asked, softly, tears forming in her eyes. The question hung in the air, laying bare the heart of the matter. Why didn't I tell them? The answer was in every dismissive comment. Every comparison to my siblings. Every "no failures allowed" text message. "You never asked," I said simply. "You decided who I was a long time ago, and that person wasn't worth your interest." I turned to address the entire family. I didn't arrange this reveal to humiliate anyone. I didn't spend 12 years building this company to prove you wrong. I did it because I love creating spaces where people feel valued, where their experience matters, where excellence means something more than status or appearance. My gaze returned to Aunt Marilyn, whose imperious bearing had completely collapsed. "The Parker name does stand for excellence." I concluded, my voice firm, but not unkind. But excellence comes in many forms. Sometimes it looks like a surgical innovation. Sometimes it looks like a legal victory. And sometimes, Aunt Marilyn, it looks like turning a wine spill into an opportunity for exceptional service rather than a public tantrum. The room remained silent, the weight of revelation hanging heavy in the air. I had imagined this moment for years, pictured their shock and regret, fantasized about vindicating words I might say. But now that it was happening, I felt no triumph, no vengeful satisfaction. Only a quiet certainty that I was finally being seen for who I truly was. "Please, everyone enjoy your dessert," I said, gesturing to the servers who had been waiting discreetly. The Paragon's signature chocolate soufflé is worth experiencing. This evening is still a celebration of family, after all. As I turned to leave, my father stood up and crossed to where I stood. "Olivia, he said, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. I don't know what to say, no. For the first time in my adult life, I looked my father in the eye without feeling smaller. You don't need to say anything tonight, Dad. We have time now for new conversations if you want them. And with that, I walked out of the ballroom head high, the weight of a decade's silence finally lifted from my shoulders. The aftermath. Rebuilding and redefining. The immediate aftermath of my revelation was chaos contained only by the dignified setting of the Paragon. Family members huddled in shocked conversations. Some stared openly as I moved through the hotel during the remainder of the weekend. Others avoided eye contact entirely. The carefully choreographed reunion activities continued, but with an undeniable undercurrent of disbelief that changed everything. Aunt Marilyn retreated to her suite that night and remained there for most of Sunday, sending Uncle Theodore to make her excuses about a sudden migraine. I instructed the staff to send up her favorite tea with house-made shortbread cookies. Not as mockery, but as a demonstration of what true hospitality means, caring for people even when they haven't earned it. The first real conversation came Sunday morning when my sister Vanessa knocked on my office door. She entered hesitantly, looking around at the space that so clearly belonged to someone in charge. I don't even know where to begin, she said, perching on the edge of a chair. Neither do I admitted. It's been a long time. Vanessa had always been the most driven of my siblings, the one who most embodied our parents' values of visible achievement. Looking at her now, I saw the toll that perfection had taken, the fine lines of stress around her eyes, the tightness in her shoulders. Why didn't you ever tell me, she asked, her voice laced with genuine hurt. All those years, those family gatherings where we talked about our lives, and you never mentioned all this. She gestured around the office. Would you have believed me? I asked gently, my gaze steady. Or would you have thought I was exaggerating to save face? Her silence was answer enough. The truth is, Vanessa, every time I achieved something, I thought about sharing it. When we opened our first hotel, when we expanded to New York, when the industry awards started coming in. But each time, I remembered all the dismissive comments, the eye rolls, the way my career choice was treated as a phase I needed to outgrow. I didn't know, she said softly. I mean, I knew we all gave you a hard time, but I didn't realize how much it hurt you. It's not just about hurt feelings, I explained. It's about respect. About seeing someone for who they are, rather than who you think they should be. As we talked, something remarkable happened. For the first time in our adult lives, Vanessa spoke to me as an equal. She shared her own struggles with the family's expectations, confessing that her perfect-seeming life included a marriage that was falling apart under the pressure of 2 high-powered careers and 3 children she barely saw. I look at you now, she said, her voice filled with a hint of longing, and I wonder if you got it right all along. You followed your passion instead of the prescribed path. You built something extraordinary on your own terms. By Sunday afternoon, Marcus and Alexander had also sought me out. Each conversation was different, some more defensive than others. But all shared a common thread: my siblings had been living with their own doubts about the Parker definition of success, even as they seemingly embodied it. Marcus admitted to being burned out from his surgical practice, questioning whether the prestige was worth the cost to his health and family life. Alexander confessed that his high-flying finance career left him feeling empty, chasing deal after deal with no real purpose. I make obscene amounts of money moving other people's money around, he said, bluntly, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. You create spaces that make people happy. Who's really successful here? The most difficult conversation came late Sunday evening, when my parents requested to meet privately in the garden terrace. I found them sitting side by side, looking smaller somehow than the towering figures of my childhood. We owe you an apology. My father began, the words clearly unfamiliar in his mouth. Many apologies, actually. My mother reached for my hand across the table, her eyes glistening. We were wrong, Olivia, about your choices, about what success looks like, about you. Why couldn't you see me? I asked the question that had haunted me for years, finally spoken aloud. Why wasn't who I actually am ever enough? My father looked away, unable to hold my gaze. We thought we were protecting you, pushing you toward a path with security and status. We couldn't imagine success outside the boundaries we understood. That's an explanation, not an excuse, my mother added quietly. We should have supported your vision even if we didn't share it. We should have trusted you to find your way. The conversation wasn't a magic cure for years of dismissal. There were difficult moments, old patterns threatening to resurface. But it was a beginning, a first tentative step toward a new kind of relationship based on who we actually were, rather than who we were expected to be. As the family departed on Monday, there were awkward hugs, promises to stay in touch, invitations to visit. I accepted them cautiously, neither expecting too much nor closing the door on possibility. Real healing would take time if it came at all. In the weeks that followed, I expanded my circle of trust beyond Sophia, Diana, and Ryan. I reconnected with colleagues I'd kept at arm's length, allowing myself to be known more fully. I dated without hiding my success or downplaying my accomplishments. I stopped compartmentalizing my life into before family and after family. 3 months after the reunion, I invited Sophia and several close friends to the Legacy, our first Chicago hotel, for a private dinner. These were people who had seen me clearly when my family couldn't, my Cornell roommate who'd loaned me textbook money, the chef who'd believed in my vision for our first restaurant, colleagues who'd become chosen family over the years. To seeing people as they are, not as we need them to be, I toasted, raising my glass. My relationship with my family remains a work in progress. Some bonds have strengthened, particularly with my siblings, as they've begun to question the values that shaped us. Others, like with Aunt Marilyn, may never truly heal. She sent a formal apology note 3 weeks after the reunion, but its carefully worded phrasing suggested her PR consultant had a heavier hand in its composition than her heart did. The most profound change hasn't been in my family relationships, but in myself. For years, I measured my success against their rejection, building an empire partly to prove them wrong. Every milestone was shadowed by their imagined dismissal, every achievement tinged with the question, is this enough yet? Would they see me now? True freedom came when I finally understood that success isn't proving your worth to people who couldn't see it. Success is building a life that feels meaningful on your own terms, surrounding yourself with people who value you for exactly who you are, and extending that same gift to others. The Parker Hospitality Group continues to thrive, expanding thoughtfully rather than rapidly. Our focus remains creating spaces where guests and employees feel genuinely valued. I've become more public in my role, giving occasional interviews and accepting industry recognition, no longer hiding in the shadows of my own creation. My parents visited the Legacy last month. It was awkward at times, old patterns threatening to resurface, but I watched my father notice the way staff greeted guests by name, saw my mother appreciate the thought behind every design element. For perhaps the first time, they were seeing my work through new eyes, understanding that hospitality isn't servitude, but rather an art form of human connection. I understand now, my father said quietly, as we toured the rooftop garden I'd designed. Why you chose this path. It suits who you've always been. Even as a child, you've always seen people noticed what would make them feel special. It wasn't everything. It wasn't a complete reckoning with the past or a guarantee for the future. But it was acknowledgement, and for now that's enough. A valuable lesson for the audience. The greatest success isn't defined by external validation, but by the courage to forge your own path and build a life that aligns with your authentic self. Don't let others' limited perspectives dictate your worth or potential. Have you ever had to redefine success on your own terms? Have family members or friends failed to see your true potential? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember, the only failure is letting other people define your worth. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to build your own definition of success.